introductions once you guys grab a seat. Oh, yeah, too. How about Trev? Yeah, Trev is just such a comfortable speaker. We can just chuck him in there.
I just.
All right, so we'll start off by just doing not a long intro, just your name, your org, and then we'll get right into the thick of things. We'll start with, here, does that work? I think so. Testing? Oh yeah,
Hello everybody, my name is Johnny. I work from Atom Accelerator DAO. We're a grant focused DAO for Cosmos stuff.
I'm John Turnback. I work for Informal Systems, and we do core development on Cosmos.
I'm Grell, founder of Union, systems engineer by background. We do ZK IBC, sovereign interoperability, no intermediaries, nation-state resilience.
I'm Trevor. You may have just heard from me, but I work for DoraHacks. We're the global leader in hackathons, developer initiatives, developer onboarding. We support a number of the ecosystems in Cosmos and beyond, and I'll stop talking now.
Amazing. All right, so to frame the conflict of sovereignty, Cosmos has so many different stakeholders. You have relayers, you have validators, you have community members, you have stakers, you have the builders, you have founders. And so what I really want to dive into is what friction have you guys observed within all, yeah, we're already getting a nod over here. What friction have you guys observed in Cosmos over the last couple of years? And like, where have we gone wrong within this world of like, we have so many people that are ethos aligned, and yet there's so much entropy. So that's what we're going to be diving into. Where have we gone wrong and where have we gone right? Anyone who wants to kick this off.
Yeah, I guess in terms of governance, I was kind of thinking this panel's kind of about governance, right?
Yep.
I think one of the big places of friction is that governance is just politics. And so I think that you naturally have a lot of sort of crowdflowing behavior. You have apathy. I can't think of another thing, but it's kind of surprising actually going through a governance process how people actually make decisions, and then like reflecting on that and like how I go myself also has characteristics of that. So I think there's a lot of friction in governance, but it's actually, I think it's kind of like human nature.
So I've been in Cosmos for a while now, and although I wouldn't consider myself Cosmos native, I've observed the ecosystem for a long time. And what I really see is an ecosystem where the ethos is aligned, but where the fundamental mechanics behind a lot of technology is not necessarily aligned to push that same ethos. With a lot of the technology, we see that there might not be a financial market for it, or at least no way to extract revenue from it. And if you lack that, then you build brittle systems. That's what we see right now. That's what we... That's what we see right now, for example, with IBC relayers. Even though IBC is a tremendous amount of volume, there's not a lot of value to extract for them. And even though the ethos is aligned in the same direction, it moves something that should not be common goods into common goods. And as you know, getting funding for common goods is always hard. Even if the ethos is aligned, everyone wants to spend money on healthcare, yet countries struggle to fund healthcare. And so for Cosmos to actually get rid of a lot of the DPS, I think it fundamentally needs a few redesigns to better align the ethos with where value is extracted.
Don't you think the relayer fees will help with that? So the relayers getting paid by users paying effectively kind of gas fees to them?
Yeah, but I mean, that's been a long time in design, and I think we've held on for a very long time without it, yeah.
You know, another like interesting conflict that arises is like builders have such a lot of times clear vision for their product, and communities tend to maybe not understand that there's always like these diverging incentives. Like founders work on many different projects. You have community members that cross-pollinate, and I guess like where have you seen that go well? Like, do you guys have any examples in Cosmos where like you look at that and you say, okay, like we're headed in the right direction as it pertains to many sovereign individuals working together in a really positive way? Because we really focus on the negativity a lot. Where are you guys seeing the most progress on alignment across the board?
This is a fun one. I think before getting into the positive, I kind of want to get to really where the problem is. When we talk about friction, I think friction is in the fragmentation of everything. And if you're in Cosmos, you understand what fragmentation means. Whether that's governance, whether that's liquidity, whether that's users, we're all kind of fighting over the same users. I really wish teams would focus on like their core product and like one thing that they do really, really well, rather than building another DEX or building another wallet, or what have you. And in moving away from the negatives, what we have seen over the past over the past several years is we've seen teams come together and begin to work together a lot more. Whether that's integrations, whether that's collaborating on a live event, which we've seen a lot recently. If you're in ETH Denver and you're watching this, you kind of know that there are a lot of events that are not just ETH-aligned events. There's a lot of good stuff that is happening when we come together and we work together, and that means that we're more efficient with our capital, time, and energy, rather than rebuilding every single thing on every single chain. We have seen a lot of that. That being said, progress is slow, but I'm in it for the long haul, and I think all the people up here are as well. And I'll pass it off to somebody else.
Yeah, there's something to say for the resilience of Cosmos, right? It might not have centralized coordination and thus sometimes seem to move slower than other ecosystems, but at the same time it's capable of surviving absolutely catastrophic events. I'm wondering, for example, when EigenLayer collapses, if Ethereum is capable of surviving this, or if the system can coordinate around that.
So, since we have governance in Cosmos, obviously it has been friction to getting stuff done. And you can relate that to the Cosmos Hub, but there's a lot of talent. It's been uncoordinated because the decentralized aspect of it tends to make it difficult to collaborate, right? And for the first time, and for our perspective, we are, as Atom Accelerated, we want to be like the stewards of the hub to kind of facilitate the movement and collaborate with the developers and the community and founders and investors, right? So you need, even though it's a decentralized, ethos, you still need a leadership to facilitate the movement.
So I want to dig into that. I want to ask a hard question here. Communities, they struggle with trust. Why? Why is there such big trust problems? Because if you assume the trust is there, then the coordination problem tends to solve itself as long as there's good leadership, right? So let's dig into that. Why is there such a big trust gap between these end users and these communities and the people that spend 40, 80 hours a week grinding away? And there seems to be a gap there.
I don't think that Cosmos governance drama is actually any worse than drama you see in politics in the real world. And I think that if you look at democratic systems, there are a lot of drama. I mean, look at the U.S. government. It's probably worse than Cosmos governance, actually. And so I'm not even talking about the policies or anything. Just if the gridlock and whatever. So I think a lot of blockchain projects operate like startups. They are startups. They have a strong CEO at the top, and they're able to operate with it. Sort of by default gives you a certain amount of focus, where maybe it's it may be a really good direction, it might not be a good direction, but they're going to go in one direction because it's under one person's kind of management. And I think even though a lot of times they have some kind of voting system or some kind of governance that's theoretically democratic, it's still kind of under the leadership of one person, and you see that a ton. And I think with Cosmos, what's interesting is it started out before 2019. It did actually start out as being where you see governance votes on the hub would go through with 90% yes or whatever. It was kind of anything would get approved. That was kind of put forth by the devs. In 2019, it kind of blew up, and it actually became decentralized. I think we see things that are a little bit more like you'd see in a democracy. I will say though, we could be better on being more coordinated, and I think we're getting there in terms of maturity. But democracies, when contrasted against monarchies, the benefit that they tend to have is they are more stable and kind of durable across different events. So we'll see if we get there, but I think that what we're facing is kind of normal for human governance.
I would say as well as any crypto project starting out, trying to gain traction, in our space almost has to be a religion. It has to set a movement, has to set a space, and at some point it matures and it no longer needs to be a religion. I think Ethereum has kind of reached that spot where Vitalik can take his hands off, and even if he's still the wunderkind, he's no longer the religious leader. And really in the whole crypto space, the only ecosystem that has achieved the same is Cosmos, that no longer needs a religious leader to set the pace and the direction, but can actually coordinate without it. Solana still has one, Avalanche still has one, and that once again shows the maturity and the resilience that you've built.
So follow-up question here. Do you think we have the tools? Like, are we going to be stuck with proof of stake, $100 community spend goes up on chain and $1 billion worth of value votes? You know, like, how far in the Stone Age are we with governance and the ability to coordinate across all of this entropy? Is it a good thing? It is where it is. Do you foresee Cosmos governance continuing to become a lot more complicated to be able to handle just the so many different stakeholders and processes needed to potentially succeed?
Yeah, I think that it would be, like with AADAO, for example, that's kind of what they're trying to do is have more focused, being able to make decisions that are not decisions that, $3 billion worth of stake being put on. I do actually think the Cosmos system with the validators is, even though it's a very, very simple system, it's pretty decent. It's like a representative democracy. So I think that's pretty key is people being able to choose representatives that they feel will, can actually read through a proposal. And I think that maybe if we could have more stuff along those lines, but I think what we do need to be focused on, like what's, how is this going to improve decision making in a kind of focused way?
I think that we face a lot of challenges. We haven't figured out governance. Nobody has. in terms of how to. I think one of the biggest challenges is how to make people care. We talked a lot about public goods. You guys heard me talk a lot about public goods. How do we get people to understand that it's important to fund the fire department? It's important to fund the police department. It's important to pay for relayers, right? How do you get people to care about that if they're not using them, right? It's kind of the same thing with governance. If it's not impacting the user doesn't care. If it's not going to increase, their bags, it's not going to be, part of financial gain for them, or it's not going to negatively impact them by a large clip, then why do they engage? And I think one thing that I don't think we've done a good job, or really, no one's done a good job of doing this, really helping the community understand why we're doing specific things. We change parameters, we increase, we decrease, we have community pool spends on marketing budgets, what have you, but like how many people understand any of that? All they're thinking of is this good for me, is this bad for me? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, like that's how politics works out there, out in the open right now. And I think that if we're going to try to be better than what's, been out there from a traditional political and governance structure as it is, I think we need to start thinking a lot more about getting the people to actually care. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't have an answer for that. All we can do is, all I try to do is talk about what I believe in and hope that we rally the same people around us that believe the same things. And beyond that, I'm not really quite sure. So if anybody has an answer for that, I'd love to hear it. Other than that, I think we should continue trying our best. I know everybody else up here does.
One thing that is severely lacking with a lot of founders of blockchains or just organized leaders is communication. Not a lot of them communicate with their communities and listen to their feedback and try to portray in a simple manner like what you're doing and how it affects you, how it affects your token that you're staking. So communication is very key, and transparency in terms of outlining, the fund, in terms of how are you spending it, who are you funding, why does that matter to you, right? So communication is definitely one thing that's lacking in our ecosystem. And then in terms of governance, like you said, nobody has it figured out, but we do have DAOs and we do have sub-DAOs. So there is a possibility to create sub-DAOs for specific niches of a blockchain to handle this specific task. And you need that center point to kind of communicate with all the sub-DAOs to say, all right, are we aligned on this project? How can we improve on it, right? So at the end of the day, it's communication between members, community, stakeholders, and a lot more presentations like this.
So I think we'll probably get close to wrapping up here. I think kind of the final question I have is, there's a lot of wealth concentration in Cosmos, and it doesn't get talked about super often. Huge asymmetry within builders launching things and people that have been there since the beginning, and it creates like a really large skew back to Trev's point of like, how do we get people to care when there's such a large gap between people whose incentive set is just they have a lot of urgency about trying to have certain outcomes happen, and then other people that aren't as invested. And so there's these like really large gap there, and it can be intimidating for community members. They can feel kind of helpless or far away from the source. So how do we solve that asymmetry? Is it even solvable? Is governance the one thing that will never be frictionless? You know, that maybe this is the one conclusion of all the panels, that maybe this is the final frontier that we'll always be chasing.
Well, so on the friction thing, I think, you know, a lot of things that go through governance are hard to understand, or they're not hard to understand, but they're complicated. So, like for instance, there was an inflation parameter prop recently, and it was misunderstood by most people who voted on it. I forget what it was actually now myself. It was like, it was going to be adjusting like what the minimum inflation could be, but not like, so this is on the Cosmos Hub, not like, but people thought it was like, oh, it's going to be, you know, 10% like forever or something. So, and it's like, you know, it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of props that like I don't even read. Like I have stake in you know, in different Cosmos chains, and I'm not even like, you know, necessarily you know, 100% on it. So I think it's like, I think enabling people to, maybe doing more to enable people to choose representatives that they can sort of trust to, not trust. I guess what it is like if you choose somebody, it's always a lot easier to have 20/20 hindsight. And so like a representative system, I think you can choose somebody, and then later, when it turns out that they were wrong, even though beforehand you didn't actually know if they were wrong or not, then you can be like, oh man, they suck, they were wrong, and switch to somebody else. And they have to do the hard work up front of thinking. So I think that's kind of like, you know, it's representative democracy, it's not a new thing.
Yeah. I guess one final challenge question is, oh, did you want to go?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Cosmos has had validators essentially as the democratic representation. How big of a problem is it that, and maybe it's not a problem, but that extremely infrastructure-focused people are interacting with extremely complicated and nuanced human relationships? Is that for the best? Is that for trade-offs, advantages, disadvantages, etc.? And
Yeah.
we'll close there. We'll round out there.
I don't want to hog it. I think I actually am not sure about this myself. I think there's pros and cons. That they're engaged, they have skin in the game, but also, yeah, I mean, they come from a certain perspective. So it's kind of hard to say. I think if you look at Stride, they use the Cosmos validator set, but they have their own set of governance for their governance, and so you know that could be an interesting example to see what happens if you kind of move away from the validator focused thing. But as a minimum viable product, I think it's pretty decent.
I'm an infrastructure person. I like to think of mathematics. My opinion is, in a perfect system, governance is a crutch. The more we can move to kind of the pure perfect protocol that just matches what we want, and the less we need to coordinate amongst humans, the more efficient the protocol starts operating. There'll always be a few things that we need to coordinate, chain upgrades and such, certain parameter changes. I think common goods will always be something that's going to be painful to get through governance. And if you can find systems that can fund common goods without needing to rally the community over and over again, that'll be a far more efficient system than we have right now. Move as much of it kind of in the kind of core protocol logic itself that just has to make financially sense for the Cosmos, instead of needing to rally different communities cycle and cycle. I think right now there might be parties with indeed an asymmetric benefit in the ecosystem, but the next cycle the current batch of users will be that, and a new batch of users will enter and feel left out, like they've missed the boat and can no longer participate in governance. And it'll just happen over and over and over in any single project. And it's almost an unsolvable problem unless you kind of remove the problem entirely, make governance simpler, and move stuff away from it.
I think I'll have one last thing to say. I'm not an infrastructure person. I'm just an average, you know what. I won't say that up here.
He's trying.
That is yeah. But what I will say is it's whether it's public goods or governance or even user friction in terms of the full user journey start to finish. I don't know if it'll ever be frictionless. I don't think it will. ever become frictionless, but it's important to try to pursue that. It's an endless pursuit of frictionless is perfection, I suppose, but to continue to try really, really hard, and it's painful. Governance is painful. Explaining things is painful, but we really need to think about our stakeholders and the users, the governance people, the stakers, and the developers, infrastructure providers, everybody. We need to think about what it's like from the other side interacting with us or our protocol or our governance, whatever. We need to think about what it means to be them and why they care, and also to help them understand, where we're coming from. Maybe we need translators. Who knows? That's why we hire teams. But we can't do it by ourselves. But we have to try to become frictionless.
So, future of governance, one word, emotion / descriptor for how you feel about future of governance in Cosmos. For instance, like excited would be like a one word example.
Optimistic.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, determined maybe.
Can I pass? No, I'm cautiously optimistic with all the big phrases. Cautiously optimistic.
Cautious, just cautious.
Cautious. Optimistic. One vote.
Veto.
And with that, let's get a huge round of applause for